Guys, what is up? Welcome back for yet another episode of the Off Grid podcast. This week's guest is just an amazing guy. His name is Ben Sherlock. Ben is an adventure cameraman, and he's worked on some of the biggest TV shows in adventure, like Blue Planet 3 with David Attenborough, Limitless with Chris Hemsworth, and he's also the personal cameraman to Ed Stafford in shows like First Man Out and 60 Days with the Gypsies. In this conversation, we talk about flying into war in Baghdad aged 21, why Ben describes his early career as a series of terrible mistakes, what it's really like to be Ed Stafford's personal cameraman, struggles with arrogance and depression in life, and how to doggedly pursue your dream. Ben's career is built on his relentless drive to see through projects that he really believes in, and you get a massive sense of that coming across early on in our conversation. Hope you guys absolutely love this one. On with the podcast. All right, we're in. We've made it.
It took a bit of time. We got there. The technical hiccups never end, whether you're filming in Somalia or you're, in the southeast of England. There are always technical issues.
Ben, welcome to the Off Grid podcast.
Thank you very much. Very, very good to be here. Very excited.
It's something I've been very looking forward to because you're super cool in the career that you've gone after. But I think what's really interesting for me is at the start of your career, the way that you describe it, it makes me laugh, and it also taught me a lot of lessons because you described the first 4 years of your career as committing a series of terrible mistakes. What were you learning at that point in time?
Gosh, where did I say that? I'm trying to think where I said that. That must have been some publication somewhere. I was correct. I think it was longer than that in reality. I think those years of mistakes extended far beyond 4 years, and they probably extended into fairly recently. But yeah, gosh. Sorry, remind me the question again. Completely, I got sidetracked.
What were you learning at that time at the start of your career?
What was I learning at that time in my career? I was learning literally everything during those first 4 years. So I came fresh out of doing my A-levels and was just incredibly arrogant. I think I assumed that I did A-levels, then I basically went to interview at various universities and did well in the interviews, and I got offered places at the 3 universities that I had applied to. And that gave me like a really, really unhealthy level of confidence, I think, because I walked away from that going, well, they all want me. So I sort of felt like I could do everything they were teaching in the syllabus. That's what I genuinely thought. But I thought there's nothing for me to learn here. So why even bother doing it? Why not do it on my own? I don't need these people. I thought, there's applications you can make to the BBC to get on board as a trainee camera operator. I'll just do that. Or I'll apply to National Geographic, and I'll do that, and I'll obviously get in because I had this insane sense of, I think, probably privilege, naivety, and arrogance, horrible mix, and just thought that I would get straight in. So I applied for all those various bits and bobs, and obviously got hit in the face with the door very, very firmly. Then I was like, well, I can just go up and start freelancing. That's what I'll do. So I'll start freelancing. So I basically worked at a camera shop, borrowed some money from my parents, and bought a little mini DV camera and started making little corporates, little commercials for anyone who would stupidly allow me to shoot for them. And that was when the series of bad mistakes started. I did a thing called, it's terrible, it's called Mayfield Music on the Meadow, which is basically this little music festival in the southeast of England. And I just got in front of the organisers and completely convinced them, and I believed it. It wasn't like I wasn't lying to them. I was like, I can absolutely deliver this because I've been sort of volunteering in that sort of world a little bit, so I can definitely deliver what I'm saying, which is basically to cover the whole event was like 12 hours. I can cover and film the entire event from start to finish with like 3-4 camera operators, and then I can deliver a full version of all the sets for 12 hours on DVDs to the people who buy the DVDs within, I think, 2 weeks is what I promised. Which is, looking back at it, I cannot believe that I was so horribly, horribly naive. And my way of achieving that, I obviously got the footage back. The shoot was brilliant, loved it, and actually the quality of the footage wasn't actually too bad. There was some pretty good stuff in there. The camera operators were volunteer friends of mine. who didn't really know what they were doing. I knew a bit about what I was doing, but not a lot. And so we had the rushes. I didn't even know they were called rushes, so just got the footage back and started cutting it. But I quickly realized I was going to have to edit through the night every day for 2 weeks solid to get this done in time. And in my brain, that's like, and that this still happens today a little bit. There was an equation there. It was like, okay, so I've got 2 weeks to do this, and then 24 hours in a day. I have a job, like I'm working during the day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So I have to work at night. That's the only way to possibly get through this and do this. So I was like, that's fine. I just stay up every night, and that's how I create this project. And so for the first 2, 3 nights, that's what I did. I just stayed up all night, and then I worked all day at the camera shop and Cameraman editing. And for the first 2 or 3 nights, it was kind of working. And I was like, I'm getting really tired. I need some stimulants. So then I'd take Pro Plus, but then the Pro Plus would stop working. So then I'd be down in Red Bull. So then I was mixing Red Bull and Pro Plus at the same time and drinking like crates of the stuff. And by the end of the 2 weeks, like I was getting, so I was like sleeping on the floor when things were rendering in the night, getting up, going to work, coming home, downing stuff, sleeping on the floor. And about a week and a half in, I thought, this is looking really good. I was like, this looks amazing. Like I remember vividly, still to this day, I remember cutting it and thinking, this is game changing. Everyone is going to love this. And I showed it to my family, which again was another terrible mistake. And they were like, oh, it's really good. Well done. It's great. You love it. Wow, what a brilliant job you've done. I can't believe you did that in 2 weeks. Phenomenal. And I was like, yeah, it's brilliant. So then I delivered it to people and it got the feedback straight away. Feedback were going like, can I swear on this podcast? Or should I not swear on this podcast?
You can say what you want.
Okay. They're like, what the fuck is this? And I was like, and I'd gone to bed that night after delivering the project. And I was like, okay, well, I've delivered it now. So, okay, I'll get some sleep. So I got a night's sleep. And then I get the feedback of what the fuck is this? I was like, what are they talking about? It's gold. I've delivered gold. What's wrong with it? So then I put the DVD in and I watched it and it was unwatchable. I mean, it was cut so fast, like to every micro beat of each track. It was boom, 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 cut for like 12 hours. I mean, it was insane. It looks, weirdly enough, like it being cut by a man who had taken an ungodly amount of Pro Plus and drunk multiple crates of Red Bull. That's what it looked like because that's what had happened. And I delivered that. Yeah, that was the beginning of my lessons, which went on for 4 years. There you go. Bit to unpack there, isn't it?
That's the best answer to the starting question of any podcast I've done. That was absolutely brilliant.
I haven't told that story in years. I genuinely haven't thought about that particular story in a long time. It was quite painful. It took me a while. I was really bruised after it because I was like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. I thought I was unbreakable. I thought that I could not sleep and still do everything I needed to do, and it would be brilliant. I couldn't trust my mind suddenly because I was like, I thought it was great. Why did I think it was great? Like I just couldn't work it out. So it massively shook my confidence.
How old were you at this time?
I was 19.
Okay, so talk me through that 19-year-old. How would you describe that 19-year-old today with the benefit of retrospect, going in there, being extremely confident on the line of arrogance, and also just an insane work ethic to deliver on a project rather than just being like, oh, I can't do it. Sorry, guys. Who was that guy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be very easy. I could definitely sit here and tell you about the negatives. That's definitely something I'm good at. I'd be very, very quick to criticize myself. I think still today, and I was definitely. I don't think it was confidence. I think it was arrogance. Looking back on it, I think back then I thought it was just confidence, but I think it was arrogance. I was energetic to an extreme, I think in every facet and every aspect of my life, the amount of energy I'd bring to a environment was always the absolute maximum. I loved being the center of attention. I loved being the center of a party. I loved being, I loved to be the one who was achieving. I loved working hard. That was a big thing that I discovered. I didn't discover that just for like 15 years old, I think. But I loved the feeling of working hard. I loved when I had the realization that I could work at that point what I thought was harder than anyone else, which obviously isn't true because lots of, as I've discovered through my career, a lot of people work as hard as I do. But at that point, because I was a small fish in a big pond, sorry, a big fish in a small pond, um, I um, I had the idea that I could work harder than anybody else. When in reality, I just had a good work ethic. Um, so that was definitely a positive. What else is about me? But at that age, I was fiercely competitive, definitely, with everyone, whether it was with friends, whether it was with family. I was fiercely competitive at all times. Um, Very driven, very ambitious. Uh, I wanted to help people and look after my friends and family, and that kind of played into like that music festival. Like I gave the jobs to my friends because they, wanted to do it, and I never even thought anything of it. Stupid. Like I should have vetted people and got professionals in. It was ludicrous. I did that a fair bit through my career, where I give work to people who I basically wanted to be with and who needed the work, as opposed to giving it to the right people for the job. Um, yeah, so that's probably the sort of primary sort of characteristics: naive, arrogant, highly energetic, driven. I would never say I was I don't think today, not particularly intelligent. I think my work ethic was what I relied upon. I think I knew from quite young, I had the impression from quite young that I wasn't very intelligent, but I had the work ethic thing and I had the drive and the energy. So I thought, well, that can cantilever against this lack of intelligence that I had a big perception of, because at school I performed really, really badly academically, very dyslexic, and all that sort of stuff. So I think because I had that sort of like really poor image in my mind of myself from an academic standpoint, I thought, well, you're not smart, you're stupid, but you've got energy, you've got drive, and you've got a work ethic, so you can just pile that on as high as possible to balance out the fact that you're a bit of an idiot. And that was pretty my general impression of myself as a child.
And then it sounds like that impressionable young man got a bit of a slap in the face when he went to work. What were the key lessons that you learnt about yourself during that period of time?
Mm. Key lessons to learn myself that time. Um, I think initially I thought that it would all happen very, very quickly. And I thought that I would get there fast and that everything that I wanted would just happen immediately. And it obviously didn't happen immediately at all. So that's definitely a reality that started to sort of sink in. And it did take me a very long time to learn the lessons, but I learned that I needed to look after myself. And again, I think I probably only learned that really in the past 8 years, probably. But probably when I hit 30, I'd say is when I probably started to properly learn that lesson. Is that I needed to actually take care of myself and I delivered better work. There was a long period of my career where I was convinced that being on the brink of exhaustion and being like both physically and mentally, so being almost like chronically depressed and being physically battered was where I would deliver my best work. Like that's where the diamonds were found in my brain. And often, if I was happy on a shoot, I was thinking, well, you can't be doing very good work. Like if you're really enjoying this, then you're not focused enough, you're not giving it enough, and you need to push yourself harder. And that was the general mentality that would go through my mind. Yeah, I remember vividly filming. There was a sequence with we did this whole thing with kung fu monks for a BBC series called Sacred Wonders, and it was one of the big sequences of my career. But it massively reinforced this concept that I had in my mind. And I filmed this. There's a whole team. It was me, Ben Crichton, Faith Finley. We had a really wonderful team on that project. And we filmed this sequence of the Kung Fu monks, and it went really well. It's beautiful. I got lots of sort of critical sort of acclaim for it. But I remember going back to the room in the middle of the day because we basically filmed from like 4 in the morning until like 11. And then we'd come back, we'd rest for an hour or two, and then we'd go back out in the afternoon and film late into the evening. I was pushing myself really hard, but I remember going back into the room one particular day, or it might have been every day. And I remember just being chronic, really, really depressed, really low. And just because I was like, you are not giving it enough. this is not good enough. You can do a lot better. They all hate you. Like no one on the team is enjoying your company. So be a better laugh first off. Be more fun, and also do a better job, because this is just not the quality that it should be. And in my mind, what happened there was when before the finished product got delivered and finished, and it was really good. Like, I mean, it's a really good sequence. I'm still really proud of it. But when I saw that, I was like, that's because you were hard on yourself. That's why you got that. It's because you were like pushing yourself. So in my mind, there was this like, it was like a negative feedback loop of going, okay, well, in order to deliver the good work, you need to be really hard on yourself and critical of yourself to the max. And that's when you deliver the best work, which I think is a really toxic negative cycle. It took me a long time to break.
Now, there'll be people who listen to that and they'll be really shocked, but there'll also be people who listen to that and they'll be going, oh my gosh, I have the same voice in my head. What
Yeah.
advice would you give to those people who have that bully inside their own head?
Yeah, it's that inner critical child, isn't it, really? I think it's really hard because, again, honestly, like it took me years and years to actually start to enjoy myself. Yeah, I mean, recently I was working on Blue Planet 3 recently, and that was a shoot that I enjoyed from start to finish. Like every day of those jobs, I was doing the opposite on those. I was basically working hard on a daily basis to go, look where you are, look what you're doing, like relish this, like have fun, like enjoy yourself. This might not happen again. You might not, this might be the last one. So just have a really, really positive experience and enjoy the people you're with because they're lovely. And that was the positive. And like everyone's having fun. You get on really well with these people. They seem to love you and you love them. Like you're a really close team. Like enjoy their company as much as they're enjoying yours. And that was I had to sort of teach myself to talk to myself in a different fashion. Honestly, I think the way I've learned to do this, which is not much help for people when they're much younger, for me, it was children. Like I had kids and I saw my negative traits infiltrating their lives. And I started to see the sort of negative talk coming out in my oldest child. And for me, that was tragic. I was like, oh my God, he's talking to himself the way that I talk to myself. And that's when I was like, the only way to stop that for him and for my other younger children is to stop doing it to myself, and to start changing my attitude towards not just day-to-day life, but work and every facet of it. So that was the big thing. I did years of. I've had therapy since I was 15 years old to try and sort of break this, and it really just didn't. Nothing ever really quite sort of cracked the seal. But having kids and watching them and going, you're going to pass that on to them. That's when I was like, no, I can't do that. And that's when you suddenly go, oh my God, I'm like so many of these experiences, not all of them. Obviously, there have been plenty of incredible times in these shoots. And like with the Shaolin Temple, there were plenty of really wonderful moments. But there were moments that I definitely missed out on. And I didn't enjoy them as much as I could have done, or should have done, or would have liked to have done. And so, yeah, when you suddenly realize, oh, you've missed out on a lot of positive experiences because you've been being just really critical of yourself. Yeah, I didn't want to do that anymore. And I actually decided to, definitely time to sort of put a full stop on that and start being positive.
What would I have to know about your upbringing that shaped the context of the character of that young man that you used to be?
Yeah, I definitely had a hard time at school. Wasn't the most positive environment for me. It's difficult because I think, there's lots of people who had tough times at school, and the usual thing is, well, but it shaped me, made me who I am. That's the sort of classic sort of line. Yeah, I think that's probably where a lot of that sort of stems from. I went to the school that I probably shouldn't have gone to, and just because I followed my brother, basically, I went where he went. And that was just a bit of a mistake. I should have gone to a much more artsy school, and embraced that side of myself and not sort of very pushed it down. And I think when I really embraced that side of myself, the sort of artistic, creative side of myself, I was much, much happier. So that was definitely a big thing that I think was a shift.
Yeah, yeah, and same in my experience as well. I had a really tough time at school
Yeah,
and feeling like I couldn't really express myself because what I found so savage about it was that anything that made you different was like target. So it was like the worst thing
right.
you could do. you had to just sort of conform. Did you feel like you were trying to like suppress your true self?
Yeah, I think my problem is that I probably, oh, was it a problem? I sort of at first a little bit, but I sort of didn't. I didn't really suppress it. I put it out there quite heavily, and there are just repercussions for doing that. Um, and yeah, I think that was probably the reality is by being outwardly flamboyant and artistic and loving drama and that sort of stuff. It created just a sort of an aggressive cycle. Um, Whereas I think if I'd been around more like-minded people, then perhaps it would have been a bit simpler. Yeah, when I got into media and stuff in A levels, everything definitely changed. I found I changed schools and went to a place where I had more of a sort of active media scene and more of an active drama scene, and that totally changed things. An amazing media teacher called Beverly Maguire, who just absolutely flooded us with yes. Essentially, it was nothing was a, if we had a crazy idea, she's like, yeah, okay, let's figure this out and we'll make it happen. And that changed. That was a massive thing for me. Suddenly, that there were like doors open to our creativity. And I was with other people who were really creative as well and wanted to just sort of like go a bit wild with that creativity. Um, for no, and it's quite nice. Like, looking back at it, it was really sort of freeing time because there was no reason to do any of this stuff. Like we were largely working outside of our briefs. We weren't really. It wasn't stuff that was for our A levels. We were just doing stuff because we wanted, creating stuff because we wanted to create. That was yeah, it was lovely. It was a really amazing time. Loved it.
And when you left college, am I right in thinking that's when you went into wedding photography?
Yeah, yeah, wedding filming. So yeah, yes. So basically, did things like Mayfield Music on the Meadow, made those kind of mistakes. Did a few little small local business films, and again at this point, I suddenly realised, okay, there's no way for me to get into TV because I had this. Yeah, I'd basically watched Long Way Round, the Charlie Borman and Ewan McGregor series. If you've ever seen it, it's amazing. So I watched that when I was 15 years old, and I was like, okay, that's that guy there, Claudio. That's the job I want. And Claudio was the cameraman. I was like, that's it. I want to be an adventure camera operator. I want to travel the world and go and make films. But there was no path into it. There was no way to sort of get into that world. And I think I realised that I wasn't going to get into the BBC or anything like that at all. Wasn't going to get a runner's job, particularly being in the southeast. So I was like, well, how do I film? How do I try and sort of get my foot on the ladder somehow? How do I buy kit? How do I film on a sort of regular basis and sort of get into the industry sideways? And I thought, well, weddings is probably quite a good way of doing it. There's a lot of them. People are always getting married, and I can use it as a training ground. It was very much like an intentional, let's use this as a training ground. And it just kind of blew up, really. I think because it was quite early on, it became quite a sort of like very quickly a blossoming sort of business and it just got a lot of work very, very quickly and it flourished. And then it sort of like slightly grew outside of my control a little bit because then I was what was that? I was like 19 years old then, 20 years old, 19 years old. And I had I had money, I had kits, I had a car, I could put fuel on it, whereas my friends were asking for petrol money. I could travel around to my mates' universities and go drink with them on the weekends and partying. And I sort of had this like proper life. I had flatmates and lived in town. It was great. So yeah, it was. But again, then I started. I think it all slightly got away from me, and it grew too quickly, and I was too young, and I was juggling like you know new romantic relationships alongside work, and not knowing how to juggle the two things, um, and the whole thing just started to spiral wildly out of control.
And you spent 3 years trying to get a conflict artist into Baghdad during the Iraq War. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was me. So me and still my very dear friend Anthony Jarman. He came to me originally. He was working. Well, we were both working in camera shops, uh, and then we're like filming, doing sort of bits and pieces on the side. And then I was filming weddings, and he was working Jessops, and then he started working for a production company, and I was filming weddings. And Anthony basically said, "Oh, I've got this thing. Do you want to come along and film this artist with me? He's in London." I think he was painting. I think the first one we filmed him was painting a couple. So basically, like a couple had invited him along to um, paint them sort of live for their anniversary. And so I went along and we did this like little mini doc thing about this artist who was a beautiful painter, beautiful artist, doing this private piece of work. And it was lovely. And I just sort of was instantly taken with Zav. And I loved working with Ants. And yeah, and then Anthony basically then told me, as oh, he went to Iraq during the first Gulf War. He was in a few other places. And he was like, I would love to get him to Baghdad. And I was like, well, why don't we do it? And again, I think Anthony was probably a bit more of a realist. He had this like idea of like, oh yeah, it would be cool. And I was like, well, let's just do it. That's absolutely 100% behind it. And so then, I think probably my energy and naivety and Anthony's had a bit more practical knowledge. The two of us basically started working together to try and get this doc off the ground. And filming regularly with Zav in the UK, doing little mini projects, and trying to find a way to get ourselves into Iraq. And we just had every door slammed in our face that you could possibly imagine. It just wouldn't happen, obviously, because Anthony at that point was working at Jessop's, and I filmed weddings. And the furthest I'd filmed at that point, I think, is Europe. So Anthony filmed a fair bit overseas at that point, but neither of us really had the credibility to get ourselves into like an active war zone. It was a pretty insane concept to get off the ground. But we just kept going with it. We just didn't really give up. I think we knew that Zav at that point. We felt like we had the idea. We knew Zav was a really good artist. He was really talented. He was good on camera. And we at that point felt like we could make a good documentary about it. So we just kept going and kept going until eventually, I kind of let go of the idea at one point and thought, well, this just isn't going to happen. And I went and did a bit of solo travel in Europe, and came back from that solo travel, and we just got a phone call. We got a phone call, and basically there was a US military guy who'd got wind of it, Sergeant Neil McCabe, and he basically got wind of this project, liked the idea of it, and got in touch with us and said, if you want, in 2 weeks' time, be it Bryce Norton, so not Bryce Norton, be at Heathrow, we'd fly into Kuwait, and we could get a flight from Kuwait into Baghdad. And that was that. Like 2 weeks later, we were on the plane on a Hercules C-130 flying into Baghdad. It was very, very surreal. And it happened, it was one of those things where nothing at all happened and then everything happened all at once. I had no money. This is one of the tricky things. Again, we didn't have any funding for this. A local production company called Prospect Arts, who I ended up working for and who Anthony worked for at the time, they basically bankrolled us a little bit with some cameras to get into the country to use. But the one big issue was that I had lots of weddings that needed to be filmed while I was away, but I had no money to pay for them. There was lots of stuff that I needed to buy myself personally, which I had no money to do. I got into quite a big car crash about 2 weeks beforehand. And I remember the car crash happening and thinking, that wasn't my fault. I was like, oh my God, that means a payout. So it was literally the first thought I thought, that means I can go to Iraq. Like I literally had this car crash, someone hit me. I was like, perfect. That was just an amazing opportunity. No one was injured, obviously. It was like a slow crash. I was actually the person, I was like, we were side to side, so I could see in their car. And we're sort of looking down thinking, this is perfect. This is exactly what I need, because it will be a quick payout and I can use that money to fund filming I need to do in the UK while I'm away and get the kit I need to do to go to Iraq sorted. And that's exactly what I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so how old were you
Unpack
at this point?
I get hazy on it, but I think I was 20 or 21. 21? I was 21. Yeah, I was 21 when that happened.
So before we get into your experience in Iraq, when you talk about banging on doors and trying to make this happen, what were you
Yeah.
actually doing? Because there's a lot of people who have dreams and want to make something happen, but then when they look at that big dream, they're like, oh, it's not possible because of XYZ excuse. So can you just talk us through a bit about how you made sure that door opened and that you kicked it down?
Yeah, I think we were talking to lots of people, lots of production companies, to try and get people to sort of like help us get there, and it wasn't happening. We were sort of in contact with various people by the MOD who we'd found email addresses for, and we're sort of repeatedly sending emails. Same with the Americans, and just sending a lot of messages. Yeah, it's not one. There are so many other examples I have of my career where there's been like really effective ways of getting projects across the line. But I think, with that, it's difficult because I could name you 100 projects that haven't happened. Um, More than 100 probably projects that haven't happened, and pitches that haven't happened, and things that I put years of my time into that have either fallen apart, haven't happened, I've been screwed out of a deal, whatever it is, but I'm still doing it. I think that's probably the biggest thing. Is the Iraq one was one of the early ones, but there were so many before it, and there were so many after it that didn't happen as well. And really, every single idea that I've had or had in conjunction with other people, I have been convinced about. It's not like I've ever gone into anything. If I've decided to start pitching something and pitching a project and pursuing it, then I've completely invested and believed in it, even if it was terrible, and even if actually in retrospect, I can look at it and go, that was never going to happen. That was never going to work. But at the time, I've been 100% invested in every single one of those ideas. And Iraq was no different. I think I put the same amount, well, again, it was a joint project, that one. Both me and Anthony put the same amount of effort into that project as I've put into every other project since that. So I think that's really what it is. It's just realizing that it might not be the one, that it might not get off the ground. And that could be for many reasons. It could be because you just didn't knock on the right door, you didn't get in touch with the right person. It could be that the idea wasn't right and there's something in there that just wasn't quite correct, and you'll get it right next time. So those are all things that are kind of outside your control. You can't really control. You can't really control all those things. Again, obviously, the further you go along, the better your pitches get, the more refined your ideas get, the better you get at spotting the good ideas in the first place. And you end up surrounding yourself with more people who can tell you if an idea is good in the first place. So, you don't take it to friends and family. You've got to take it to people who are not within your circle. Take it to people who are actually objective. That's really, really, really important to actually get a proper read on whether a project is viable. But I always felt like the one thing that I could control again was the effort that I put into it. And that's just not never letting that. If you genuinely believe in the project, then you won't ever give up on it. You'll keep going until it's, until it happens. I've got multiple projects right now which I have been banging on doors for years. I'll keep doing it, and I'll keep going. Yes, indefinitely. Really, I'll just keep because I still think they're good projects. So I'll keep banging on doors. I'll keep refining the projects, keep sending, and every time it gets knocked back, I can refine it a bit further. And it might be that eventually some of those projects I go, okay, maybe that one isn't actually good. It's been knocked back enough times, and I can see now that it's not a good project, and I would let it go. But I think that's probably the only real advice is if you genuinely believe in if you don't genuinely believe in it, and there's even like a semblance of doubt that it isn't good, then you either need to refine it and make it better, or you need to let it die. But if you genuinely in your heart believe this is a really good story and this would make a great show, then just don't stop. Like you just keep going. Particularly with pitching out projects, you can, I have lots of other work on. I do it on the side. It's like, it's your side job. It's the thing you do in the evening. It's when you're out at parties and with friends. That's the project you're talking about. My friends and family would, they'll say that, like, if they know about so many of the projects which I've got on the back burner, and they used to not take them seriously. They used to be like, "Oh, Ben's got another crazy idea and it's not going to happen." Whereas now I think they're taking it a bit more seriously because after 18 years of doing this, quite a few of them have come off. So now it looks like a really successful career. When you look at it now, like, oh, well, that came off and this came off and all these projects sort of happen. It's like, that's great, but you can't see the graveyard of failures that sit around it and the years of getting told no for things that sit around that as well. And it is a graveyard of failures that it's littered with them. But all people can see is the successes. But I don't, because I lived through all of the failures.
And you managed to get embedded with the US forces in the Iraq
Yeah.
War. What was that experience like when you're sat on the Chinook and you're 21-year-old civilian going to war?
Yeah. I mean, being on that the Hercules C-130, heading into Baghdad, I was definitely scared, like anxious about doing a good job because I didn't. And again, I was pretty naive from a filmmaking standpoint. I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know what. This is generally true. I didn't know what depth of field was. So getting the background out of focus, the foreground in focus. I didn't know that was really a thing that could be changed. So by changing your aperture, I didn't realize that by changing my aperture, which lets more light in or less light in, it could make the background fuzzier or clearer. I didn't know you could do that, which is one of the sort of that alongside shutter speed, so it moving quicker to capture motion, um, sort of fast motion or slow motion. I didn't really realize that was a thing. Um, so I was very naive from that standpoint. So I was very nervous about my technical skills. That was the biggest thing I think that I was feeling. I was being very nervous that could I actually deliver on this job because I didn't really know what I was doing. Um, but as it went on, I say after the first couple of days on the ground, I was just having the absolute best time. I loved every minute of it. It was absolutely fantastic, that project. I loved it. I remember Anthony said to me, I remember we were walking along, and obviously I was going back to filming weddings after this. It was I kind of knew that it wasn't like this was immediately going to lead to something else. I knew by this point that careers don't just happen through one massive moment. There is a series of mini breaks that end up looking like a big break, but they're not. They're just lots of small breaks that happen, and eventually you get there. So I knew I wasn't going to come back and land and be suddenly wildly successful. Um, but I knew that it was beginning of some sort of change. And Anthony, I remember him turning to me and he went like, "You're loving this." And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "You're not going to go back to weddings, really, are you?" I was like, "No, this is the beginning of the end. I can't. I have to do this for the rest of my career. This is definitely what I want to do." I even think I remember walking along and looking at my shadow, and I had the body armor, and I had my camera and my tripod on my shoulder, and I just thought, I just love everything about the way this makes me feel. I love the excitement of it. I love the stories we got to tell, the people we got to meet, the places we got to go that you wouldn't normally get to sort of go to. Um, I loved how hard it was. I loved how exhausted we were, but everyone else was exhausted as well. The pressure, I felt like it just made me deliver in a way that I'd never delivered before. Both the sort of like the danger element and the actual physical pressure and the sort of editorial pressure to deliver a project, and also the interpersonal drama and pressure between me, Zav, and Nancy, like that dynamic, sort of trying to sort of manage that as well in a heated, you know, active war zone. All those things together, I loved it all. I really did. I loved the pressure. It was a pressure cooker, and I like being in pressure cookers.
Did you ever feel like you had a moment to yourself where you go, "Oh God, I might die out here"?
uh, well, we were in like rocket attacks and IED attacks and bits and pieces. So there was definitely I guess there was probably fear in that sense. I Yeah, I did. I think I was probably too naive to really think beyond the fact that I was just having so much fun, um, and that I was doing a career and a job that I loved. I couldn't believe how lucky I felt more than anything else. So it never crossed my mind that I could remember the idea that I would like die or get injured, which again was probably what it was, incredibly naive. But I never felt the sense that I never felt like I never felt a sense of fear that would prevent me from doing my job. Um, at that point, I felt scared and nervous and anxious and lots of these sort of feelings. But at no point did it make me think, "Well, I can't do this. I don't want to be here." That feeling never really came in. It was there was a fear there, but it was never enough to make me think, "Well, I don't want to be here." Um, because I love the whole experience was just too overwhelmingly, exciting.
I'm absolutely amazed as to how much you relished how hard it was. The exhaustion, the being tested, particularly at that age as well. What do you see how that's quite unusual?
Um, I see how that's so unusual. It's a tricky one to answer because most of my career has been being surrounded by people who are exactly the same. So, like, I've had, yeah, that is the reality. I think most of the time on shoots, it's not abnormal. If you usually, when I've done a lot of work with Ed Stafford, the survival expert, and he's a really good mate of mine, and we spend a lot of time together. And all the crew that are with him on the ground as well are kind of the same as well. Like they all relish the long hours, they all relish the hard work. It's not really, and so does he. Um, so it just kind of, I think maybe just feed each other. Really, I think you probably just like feed your own mental illness for this stuff. It's probably the reality because everyone's got the same problems. Um, so yeah, I think I've always enjoyed hard work from a young age. That's always been the case because again, I think it probably cantilevered that concept that I wasn't enough. Um, and then most of my career has been spent surrounded by people who also work really hard, and love it and relish it. And then I think that the tricky thing is that if you get someone on board who isn't like that, that gets really tricky because you can't understand them, and they quickly struggle, and then you struggle to understand why they're struggling, and that's when you've really got to engage like your empathy to go, okay, not everyone is like us, not everyone is going to enjoy. And again, I don't think it's not also that you're always really enjoying it in the moment. Like I'm sure there'd be plenty of people, I'm sure Ed would tell you plenty of stories where I've been really grumpy and had a really rough time and looked like I'm having a shit time. But there's always the knowledge that the harder it is in the moment, not always, but often, the harder it is in the moment and the more grim it feels in that moment, the more you're going to enjoy talking about it afterwards. And like so much of it is that type two fun, right? Where you know that when you're being smashed by mosquitoes or you're freezing cold. And I remember being with Ed. We were in China and we were both in a survival. Well, it was supposed to be for two people, but it really just fitted one. You basically pulled it over yourself. So me and Ed were inside this like survival thing. And he was like, we were literally like there, like nose to nose almost. And it was like there was a full blown lightning storm outside, and we were in this huge swamp. Completely everything was drenched and soaking wet, and the rain was sheet rain. We were properly cold, like really shivering. It was dangerous for sure. We just could not stop laughing. Like the hysterics that we were having inside that thing about what a ridiculous situation we got ourselves in. And the only thing I enjoyed more than that was discussing it in the pub afterwards. Like when me and Ed could sit in a bar and recall that story to each other, both had the same memory, both like just crack up again about how extraordinary and how funny it was. It's worth it. It was worth being exhausted, cold, you know, in a slightly dangerous, precarious situation because it was so much fun to talk about afterwards.
Now, you've spoken about a pressure cooker and thriving in that environment. I know
Mm.
when it comes to team, you have spoken about relationships needing to be tested in that kind of pressure chamber. What? Why is that important?
As in what? As in team members being tested under extreme situations.
Yeah, why is that important to sort of test your relationship under pressure within a team?
Yeah. I mean, so often, right, in teams or on shoots, everything works. I said that the normal is that everything works and things go as they should do. That's great. That's kind of the way that it should do. If all the planning goes exactly correctly, then everything goes off without a hitch. Everything's fairly stress free, and you have a lovely time, and everyone goes home at the end of the day. It's all good. But there are times when things do go wrong, and things don't work, or there are dramatic or dangerous situations, or the weather closes in, or kit breaks in the middle of a situation where you need to work immediately. And that's when you need to know that the people around you are people who are not going to crumble in those situations, and they're going to be able to like use their brain, because I think so many people just stop being able to think, and being able to sort of like think rationally in those moments. And they are often, I think the biggest one that I've seen by people that I think don't react well under pressure is they start taking it far, far too seriously. Because ultimately what I do for a career doesn't really matter. Like, I mean, it's just television, or it's just, digital content. Like it doesn't really matter. No one's going to have their life saved from it. We're not curing cancer. We're making entertainment programs, or information programs. So I think one of the biggest issues I have is when people start taking it far, far too seriously. And then they get blinkered, I think, in those situations, because all they can see is like the problem in front of them, don't see the bigger picture. And I think when you start getting like tunnel visioned on something and start taking it really seriously, you stop being able to problem solve creatively. And that's what filmmaking is. filmmaking in like extreme environments at least is all about is problem solving creatively and thinking completely, um, yeah, in a completely sort of new way. That's definitely what my job is about. And you want people around you who can do that because, you know, wherever you are, kit's going to break, things are going to happen that are unforeseen. You can't possibly see every sort of outcome. So you want people around you who can think laterally and people who could be calm and good fun under pressure. Because at the end of the day, you're going to go home and you're going to want to go on another job. And you're not going to go on a job with a person who thinks they're curing cancer when they're just making television. You're going to want to go on a job with someone who doesn't take it all too seriously.
And I saw that you were filming with Ed Stafford on First Man Out. I
Yeah.
love that show. That
Oh,
was
really?
like massive favorite of mine. Like obsessed with it. Me and all my friends, we used to watch it together, and we used to like talk about how we'd do a similar thing and all of that. So I really wanted to ask you what was it on that show? Was there ever a time where you got pressure tested on that show and you were you Ed's like personal cameraman who's filming him as he's doing the challenges?
Yeah, so I see what they call shooting PD on those projects, shooting producer director. It just that basically just means that you kind of do everything on the ground when you're with him. Yeah, it was a fun project. That it was a big team, but there were definitely, you know, there were plenty of successes on that, and times when everything sort of went right. But there were definitely times where I was pushed too far, and I pushed myself too far. That's definitely happened on that show. That was, and because I think on that show in particular, because there's like 50 or so people, 50, 60 people on the crew, and they're all like pretty hard people. They're all, generally speaking, either physically fit or able to push themselves. Um, there's no sense of like a 12-hour day. Like everyone's just going to work as long as they need to work. Everyone plays hard and works hard. You know, it's that kind of culture. Um, and I was definitely guilty of pushing. I think that's probably one of the more recent examples of where I felt like I pushed myself too hard and definitely came undone for it. Yeah,
Can you give an
I,
example?
yeah, I had two drone crashes on one shoot, which was ludicrous. So there was one time where we were basically doing what's called the infill. It's the moment when they start the race. They were jumping off a waterfall, Ed and the competitors jumping off this waterfall and then swimming, and that was where the whole thing started. And I was getting the drone shots basically of them jumping off and doing it. However, I hadn't flown it before, and there was a lot of time pressure. And what I should have done is gone, despite the time pressure, we'd stop. I need to practice this drone flight because it's a bit more complicated than I thought. And I want to take my time in doing this. There's weather coming in, so let's just take this a bit slow. That's what I should have said. But what I did instead was go, yep, good to go. And that was because I was exhausted, really. And I think I was like, yeah, fine, I could do this, no problem. Got this in the bag. I've done this a million times. Yeah, there's lots of people around. And so I was like, yeah, fine, just go for it. And just I didn't sort of check my surroundings. I think, okay, the weather's coming in, everything feels a bit tense. And that's a really, really good sign for me now. Is when there's a general feeling of like rushing and tension, I slow down now. I do the absolute opposite. So my general, like when people are trying to rush you, obviously your instinct is to rush as well, but it's the opposite of what I think you should do. If someone's trying to rush you, it's because like things are going wrong and time pressure is coming in, and all that's going to do is pass down that time pressure to you and put you in a situation where you're going to start making mistakes. And that's basically exactly what happened. And I basically just flew the drone backwards and just didn't see a branch, smacked into a branch. Somehow, miraculously, the drone landed on this like pillar that was a huge pillar in the middle of this river, and was couldn't be more like this sort of wide. And it just crash landed straight on there. And again, I should have then learned from this. I should have gone, I got lucky there. We managed to get a ladder up to it, got the drone back, and it was completely fine. So what I should have done at that point is go, okay, you're tired, you're being pressured because there's time pressure on this shoot, and you're reacting to that time pressure by rushing. So slow down, Ben, and just take it easy. Instead, I didn't take that lesson on at all. I just thought that was weird. Don't know what happened there. Let's move on. Didn't debrief with myself at all in that situation, and that's what I should have done. Should have a proper sort of debrief. And then a week later on that shoot, and we've been doing more crazy hours and long days, which is totally fine. But I was definitely tired. And I still don't really know what happened, but I was basically flying it over a mountain range, the drone, and just lost signal. And the thing was in bits when we found it. I must have I don't know what I clipped. Got no. I still to this day don't know what happened. But I must have flown it into something. And I'm a very experienced drone pilot. I've been flying drones for a very long time, all over the world in lots of different conditions. And I'm fully licensed and trained. And I shouldn't have made that sort of mistake. And the fact that I made two of those mistakes on one shoot, it was at that point I was like, "You're knackered." But it took me that time towards the end of that shoot to go, "Oh, I'm exhausted. I'm really, really tired, and I'm getting pushed by people when I shouldn't be, and I need to stop and slow down." But I didn't learn a lesson quick enough, and so I lost a drone, which is a shame. But no one died, so there we go.
So when you're in these situations and you're making mistakes, what did you learn about having to control your emotions? Because you've got this really unique experience in that everything's like very high pressure, and that is the shoot. It's got to happen. They're only going to
Hmm.
jump off this waterfall once, so it
Yeah,
needs to count. So how do you kind of deal with that pressure now and make sure that you're able to operate under that pressure chamber that you work in?
yeah. How do I deal with that pressure now? I think I try and be more conscious about what is going on around me and how I'm feeling, how I'm reacting, how my body's feeling. So I probably try and check in with myself a bit better and actually stop, look around, try and feel what I'm trying to sort of feel what I'm feeling internally. Sounds a bit wishy-washy, but try and feel how is my body feeling? Like, is my body tired? Are my eyes tired? What's going on physically with my body? Am I making any sort of small mistakes that are stacking up to big mistakes? And just sort of slow everything down, really. And by slowing these things down, you tend to actually end up moving faster and making less mistakes. That's probably the biggest thing that I tend to do. I check in with other people, and I encourage other people on shoots to check in with me as well about how they're feeling, and I'm a bit more conscious of that. I look after myself better. I think that's the big thing. I used to sort of drink a lot on shoots. I didn't eat very well. There's all those sort of basic sort of things that I just do completely differently now. But that's the benefit of being a little bit older. You sort of get away with it for a certain point when you're younger, but I think that's getting away with it from a luck standpoint, and the luck does run out eventually. So I just look after my body better. I try and listen to my body and my mind a bit more. I check in with other people, and I just slow down. That's the biggest thing.
For people who have no idea about your job and they look at what you do as an adventure cameraman and go, "Oh my God, it just looks and sounds amazing. You've got all these incredible stories and experiences around the world." What are the sacrifices that those people don't see in order to have a job that you do?
Interesting. I mean, yeah, again, it's so difficult because obviously, on the face of it, it is outrageous, and I'm so aware of that it is an outrageous job. Every job I go on, someone says at some point, "We're so lucky." Like that's generally speaking, as nearly always gets sort of uttered, and I am fully aware of that it is an incredible privilege to get to go. You get flown to some incredible places and meet some amazing people. It doesn't have to be far away. I could go to. I did a thing with um, former President Barack Obama. I got flown up to Glasgow for that, and that was an incredible privilege to do that. So you get access to these amazing stories. So I'm fully aware of how amazing it is, how lucky I am. But the reality is that I'm trying to do less of it. Actively trying to travel less and take less jobs. And the reason for that is because the toll that it takes on your family, on your life in general, is enormous. Uh, and if you have kids, it's very, very difficult on them. I think the divorce rate around amongst DOPs, the divorce rate around DOPs is very, very high. Most of them are on their third marriages because they're away so much. That's it's quite common. And yeah, I think particularly when it comes to children, when they start actively getting really devastated and gutted that you're going away on long trips, that gets hard to take. I had one recently where I basically had a phone call, and this will sound ridiculous to a lot of listeners, I'm sure, but I had a phone call for a really good friend of mine. and she called me up and said, "Look, we've got a situation. Could you pack your bags and be at Heathrow in 12 hours because we've got a shoot with whales in Antarctica, and you'll be gone for 6 weeks. But you got to leave in 12 hours." And it was like one of those moments like, "Whoa, Antarctica." Obviously, like everything about me is like, "Yes, this sounds incredible. I'm desperate to do it." I was like, "Give me 5 minutes just to think about this. Like, actually take a minute and think about this." And my kids weren't home at the time, and they wouldn't have been home, so I wouldn't have seen them before I went away. So I wouldn't have had a chance to talk to them about the fact I was going to go away for 6 weeks. And I chatted to my partner about it, and I was like, "I don't think I can do it because I I can't do that to them basically." I was like, "Because they will be devastated. They won't have time to process it." And I promised my kids that I would give them, you know, notice before going away. I promised them that I wouldn't go away for like month-long trips anymore. That I'd do like a maximum of like 2 weeks away. And that's the deal that I made with my children. I was like, I can't break that promise to them. So I'm gonna have to say no to it. And so I turned it down. Um, and the really, really, really fucking annoying thing is that I was chatting to my cousin or someone recently at a birthday party, and my eldest was just behind me, didn't know it was there. And he overheard me talking to them about this, telling that exact story to them. And he went, "You did what?" And I was like, "All right, you okay?" He's like, "What do you mean you turned down Antarctica?" I was like, "Well, so you weren't supposed to hear that?" But yeah, I did, because I didn't want to, because it was last minute. You would have known. It would have been destabilizing. You would have missed out on like rugby and swimming. And it was like 6 weeks long. He was like, "You're an idiot. You definitely should have done that." It's like, for God's sakes, so annoying. Yeah, really irritating. There we go.
Oh, well, Ben, after having this conversation, I feel like the best way to leave it for people listening is on dreams, because
Mm,
what I admire so much about you is that you just have this dogged determination and persistence to get what you want. And
mm.
it's so clear within you. So for those people who maybe do know what it is they want to do and they're not there yet, what advice would you leave those people on to really go and fulfill their dream?
Yeah, fulfilling a dream. Interesting one, isn't it? Always feels like, um, yeah. What would my advice? Wanting to fulfill your dream. I think the first one is probably a bit of like a practical thing, is to really think deep and internally about what it is that you actually want. And is it genuinely the right thing for you and for the life that you want to lead? And not just go into something blindly. I think you have to really deeply think about it and not just go, "Oh, I want to be a filmmaker," or, "Oh, I want to," whatever it is. I think there's to be some sort of like deep introspection about it. And then I think stress test it. So for me, that was talking to friends and family about it. And often you'll get told you're stupid and it's wrong and you aren't capable of doing it. And I had that a lot. Both from, not again, a lot of my family were very supportive, but I did have some people who were sort of like, "No, I think you should go into sales. That seems like a stupid idea." And I think stress testing it like that and listening then to your own reaction. Like, is your reaction one of doubt at that point? So if you're starting to get lots of criticism about the idea that you have and you're getting a lot of internal doubts, I'd say that's a strong indication that maybe the idea isn't the exact one that you should be going for. Because if there are doubts around it, they're probably there for a reason. And I think actually sometimes to take them a bit more seriously is quite important. However, if, and again, this is just from the people I've spoken to and from my own sort of from my own experience, if when that sort of like feedback comes back and it's negative feedback, if all that does is strengthen your resolve and you think, "No, actually, I still definitely want this," and if you really have that strong internal feeling, despite the criticism that you get towards you, that this is the right thing, it's what you want to do, then that has to just be used as fuel for your fire. And you should actively seek out that criticism of your idea because all it will do is stress test it further. So the more criticism you get, and the more strong it makes your idea, and more like deep, more you sort of deepens your resolve, um, the more likely it is that you're going to succeed in achieving what you want to achieve. You just need to use that stuff as fuel for your fire, but then also don't waste it. Don't like the criticism you get. You've got to listen, even if you're not doubting yourself, but there's a reason someone's saying it. So if someone's criticizing you, going, "Yeah, but you're not very good. You don't really understand the basics of filmmaking," you know. And I had that loads. First I was like, "Well, fuck you," and then second I was like, "Right, straight on the internet. How do I learn the basics? Where can I find this stuff out? What can I do to so I don't have to when someone comes at me with that criticism again, I can shut it down and go, actually, I can tell you exactly what an XLR is. It took me a long time to learn out what that was, by the way. I was well into my filmmaking career. It's very embarrassing. But like I think you can use all of their criticism as notes for where you need to deepen your understanding of what it is that you want and strengthen your resolve to get what you want. Does that answer your question?
Ben, absolutely, more so. And Ben, thank you so much for coming on, and
That's a
for
pleasure.
me, just I just feel like pumped. I love it. You've given me a lot of energy to get after the dream and really go for it. So yeah, thanks a
Oh,
lot for
good.
coming on.
That's a pleasure, man.
Cheers, Ben.